Well, I think we'll start. Thanks for joining us for the panel on best practices for live streaming. We're gonna, I think the quality of live streaming keeps improving year and year, every year. There's like lower cost equipment that's higher quality, and there's better infrastructure to produce it, and it's looking more and more like television, basically, with the live streaming. Plus also the producers, the content producers who are creating it are increasing their more knowledge and experience and stuff. So I think, so at this panel, we're going to talk about, we have some of the people who are the top streamers, working with major companies and doing a lot of the high quality streaming that you see. And we're going to hear about some tips and tricks that they have and how they handle their live streaming. I'll introduce myself a little bit. So I'm John Orland, and up until last month, I ran the video operations at TechCrunch. And I have some new things up my sleeve, but I'm not quite ready to publish that. But before that, I worked at Yahoo and CNN for many years, and I've hours and hours and hours of producing live television or streaming. So I'd like the panel to each quickly, in half a minute or so, introduce yourself and say what kind of projects you work on, and we'll start with Alden.
Hi, my name is Alon Fertig. I'm a product marketing manager at Ustream. How many people are familiar with Ustream? So I know, okay. Good majority of people. So Ustream's a live streaming platform. We've been around since 2007, and we provide streaming for everyone from someone who wants to stream puppies in their house to when Sony wants to announce a new PlayStation to when Salesforce wants to stream Dreamforce conference. So we deal with people streaming from the smallest, lowest budgets. How can I do this with my old computer, spending no money, all the way up to major budget productions with satellite trucks and streaming from different locations all around the world. One of the things I've done at Ustream is I've supported all those people in making sure that those live stream events are a success. I've helped design some of the products that people use to stream those events, and I'm always interested in helping people that want to stream on any kind of budget learn how to do it better, more effectively, and would love to hear anyone's feedback as well after the panel if you have thoughts, opinions, suggestions about Ustream.
I'm Bill McCandless. I run the video business for Bleacher Report. Video is based in New York. Been there for about a year and a half. While Bleacher Report's still a very young company, video's even younger inside of it. We've had a business now for about 2 years. We only started streaming live in the last 12 months. So it's been very much a lot of test and learn for us, which is very much the mantra of the site. My background goes from digital all the way back through linear, so it's, there's a lot of paths here that are familiar familiarly tread. We're, as a growth business inside of a growing business inside of Turner Broadcasting, we have a lot of freedom, and so we're always hunting for opportunities to take advantage of that freedom, be it through storytelling or devices or areas like streaming. So the one thing that I come to these conferences for is to really also look for these kind of great ideas and great producers and who's got something to do that hasn't been done before. And we're trying not to reinvent television, but invent what's going on the web in terms of snackable, consumable video.
I'm Chris Mangum with Yahoo. I lead the digital media services team. This is a big, long title for live streaming, and I have a small VOD capture and edit team. We provide live streaming services for any Yahoo property that wants to stream. Most of the time it's news, sports, entertainment. Last night we did the Hunger Games premiere, if anybody caught that. We basically stream globally and scale to meet those needs.
I'm Jack Ferry. I'm an independent producer, director. I'm also a technical director. I started in broadcast television, mostly working for live news, Reuters, CNN. And then I got into the internet like 2006. I have a tendency to do zany, wacky projects that have far too small a budget and not enough time to get together. It seems to be my MO. I tend to work on sort of sillier, fun, and comedy stuff. Last year, I was the director and executive producer of a show called My Damn Channel Live, which was the first daily live comedy show on YouTube, which was really fun. We would bring on YouTube stars and popular comedians onto the same show and play wacky games and had a lot of fun. But I've also worked for Access TV, which used to be HDNet. I worked on a show called Gotham Comedy Live. I was a TD. I worked for Watch What Happens Live, Nick Studio 10 on Nickelodeon. I worked on the Make a Band Famous stage for MTV's OMAs, which is the Online Music Awards, which is this insane 24-hour live concert/award show in multiple cities and multiple stages. Andrew WK played drums for 24 hours. It was nuts. And I've also worked for What's Trending, for YouTube's Geek Week, and I'm going to be directing this year's Tubathon, which is a telethon to benefit Covenant House on December 12th at the YouTube Space LA. I tend to do a lot of stuff with YouTube, but I don't work for YouTube. So if you have angry things to say about the new comment system, please don't tell me, because I've got nothing to do with that.
Okay. Well, and speaking of comments, we will take 10 minutes, not to talk about YouTube, but 10 minutes of Q&A afterwards at the end of the panel here to ask whatever questions. So I think it's fair to say that there's not one way to stream a live event. I think there's probably, even the folks on this panel probably do 15 different ways of streaming an event. It just depends on the event. There's so many variables. But while with that as a caveat, I guess I wanted to talk about pick a typical type of event and how, what's the technical process to get it from happening at a place to the audience at home. I mean, again, there is no typical event, but just like one that you do a lot, or a standard one that you think might be useful for the audience. Just kind of get us from the event happening to someone's screen. I mean, a little technical, but not every cable, So could someone want to start on that?
Games last night.
Like the infrastructure.
So yeah, we'll kick it off with that then. So last night we had, so it generated from here via satellite. We downlinked it in, I'm from Dallas, I forgot to mention that. So we downlinked it in our facility in Dallas. We had a 3-camera shoot. One was the main program feed, one was the fashion camera feed, and one was the fan cam feed. So we downlinked 3 different signals in Dallas. We encoded it. We use Akamai right now to distribute it globally. And as far as kind of the back-end hardware, we use elemental encoders to encode everything. So it comes down from satellite, 10 dishes on the roof, through our audio-video router, and into the encoders, and then out to the world.
How many streams are you outputting when you do a webcast?
So it's different on every device. We provide 6 on the desktop with a high of 3.1 megs, all the way down to a little over 500K, and then there's 5 on the iPhone, and then we supply 1 stream for Android devices. Anybody else have a big challenge with Android devices in here? Yeah, live? Yeah. That's why we really only do 1 stream. There's no bitrate switching technology for Android.
It's a mess.
Yeah. Is most of the other bitrate switch like
they're all adaptive? Yeah, we're adaptive at Yahoo right now, and by the end of this quarter, we're going to be HDS live with Adobe.
Do you, Alden, or whoever?
I mean, that feels. I mean, I don't have access to satellite charts, but that pretty much sounds like everything that everybody would go through. Is you really. Yeah. When we think about an event, because we're very product-based and because so much of our audience is on mobile, we reverse engineer. So we start with the Android problem and reverse back from there. How are we going to make sure this is on every device, and how is it visible, so that the way that our users are consuming these streams and looking at these videos, be they VOD or streams, we have to think about that going in. And so we end up in some boxes that we don't necessarily want to be in, and you get into a multi-vendor environment where you're using your live view to get to AEG, to get to Akamai, to get to Uyala, to hope that it ends up on an Android. So you think about some of those paths, and whether it's a satellite truck or it's a live view, it's the same problem. It's still a BNC cable plugged into something. Yeah. And then it's a lot of back end and a lot of thinking about product, which is something that, as television producers, we didn't always have to think about product. We never had to think about the television. But here now, when we're thinking about these Android devices, you have to stop and think about how your shots are framed, what your graphics look like, and all of your encoding. So it gets you out of your creative space every now and then, and I'm much more on the creative side. So you do have to make sure you separate those two and start to think in those compartments. But it certainly, Android creates a lot of challenges.
Mm-hmm.
I think in terms of a typical live event for us, what Chris described is definitely typical workflow for us on a large-scale live event. On the opposite side of the spectrum, we also have people operating a much smaller budget. So I'd say we can maybe make 2 smaller buckets from that. There's sort of a extremely low, like $0 budget, and those people might use our web broadcasting software. They might use our software, Ustream Producer. They might use Adobe Flash Media Live Encoder. And then a step up from that, someone might use something like Wirecast or something like a new tech TriCaster. And for those types of events, pretty much Satellite Truck is going to be out of the budget, so they're using whatever internet connection they can get access to. And sometimes those can actually be really good. You don't always have to do a Satellite Truck to have a great connection. And sometimes those internet connections can be really, really horrible. So since this panel is best practices for live streaming, you have to have good internet. It's just like the number one most important thing.
What's good internet?
So good internet, I mean, it all ranges, and it's a tough question, but basically it's the best you can possibly get with the most bandwidth because you're going to run into issues if you think you have a certain speed and you worry about what speed someone quoted you. It's really more about making sure that you're on a network that is, you should be plugged in with a wire, not on Wi-Fi. You should have some contact with the IT people to make sure that you tell them that you're going to be doing streaming and make sure that they're allocating the type of bandwidth you need to do streaming. Something like this would be a great situation here with a hotel. You know, if you hop on the guest Wi-Fi, I don't know, I wasn't even able to hop on the guest Wi-Fi, I don't know, it just rejects the password. But that type of internet connection, it's going to be, they're going to have all sorts of funky stuff going on. They're going to have like proxies, they're going to be filtering traffic, they're going to be like randomly logging you out every, you know, 30 minutes or something. So you really need to make sure that you have a solid internet connection. I always recommend you have about 2x whatever bandwidth you want to stream at. So if you were sending a single stream, like Chris said, a single stream, your stream was 3.1 megabits per second, you want to make sure you had an upload bandwidth of at least probably 6 to 8 to 10 megabits in that situation. If you have like a 1 or 2 megabit up connection, you can still do streaming, but I would be looking at doing like an 800K 640 360 stream, and don't be trying to push HD content out on a weak connection, because when you're trying to provide quality to people, you're going to end up just providing a choppy stream that maybe looks great at 1 frame per second when those frames come through, but you know, you want to just think conservatively and make sure you work with what you have.
And we haven't talked about audio, but you know,
I'm sorry?
we haven't talked about audio, but it's, you know, it often gets dropped. You know, people, I'll just plug the mic into the camera, and that's like your worst option. So it's, you know, there's a lot of pieces that go in. It was interesting to hear you talk about Wirecast, and I'm sure they're here.
Stream?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're here.
What's been your experience with Wirecast?
My experience with Wirecast has been great. I think it's, you know, I think there's, we've worked with all sorts of people, and I don't want to mention any names of anyone, but I'll just say every single product in the market fails at some point or another, even the most expensive encoders. So I've certainly been on the phone with people when their $40,000 encoder doesn't look good, or they can't figure out how to operate it, or it requires a restart. So I think, you know, the best system is the one that you know, the one that you've tested extensively, the one that you know is stable on that, in that environment with those inputs. And so, you know, any system is only as good as your ability to be able to test it and really feel confident with it, and also know how to get under the hood and tweak settings or whatever. I mean, I've been on the phone on just huge budget events, and we're having to explain to people like how to go into deinterlacing and turn it on, so that they didn't just ruin their multi-million-dollar production with, you know, crappy lines through it. So
We, it's another good point. Always run a backup encoder if you have access to one. We back up everything at Yahoo. So it's a big encoding setup for every event.
And it's your own encoding farm?
Yeah.
I mean, obviously the budget is going to determine whether you can have a satellite truck or you're encoding on site and stuff. Certainly some of these questions are going to be based on the budget that you have. I guess I want to say, like at a convention though, where there is a Wi-Fi, like to the audience, sometimes it is possible to like work and dedicate a certain part just to the streaming if you're able to work with the IT person, so you can dedicate some to the webcast and the rest of the crowd. So there are ways of doing it if you have a good IT person, I guess.
Yeah, it's always good to ask for a dedicated drop, and you're at an event like this. When we did Watch What Happens Live at VidCon this year, we needed to get an independent drop just because the internet situation there was just, I mean, it was an online video event full of like famous YouTubers, so you can imagine the Instagrams that were going on. So bandwidth was a real problem, so we had to get, and I'll echo what you were saying, I think it needs to be at a minimum 1.5 times the stream speed should be your bandwidth.
The reality is you'll never have enough.
I mean,
you can talk about things that can break, and you're looking
Right.
for the weakest link. The problem is every link in the chain is weak. Like your camera's probably your best piece of equipment in the entire process.
Yeah.
Be it a satellite truck, particularly digital. I mean,
would you
you're
say
toast.
that the connectivity is like one of the hardest parts of it? That's
It's
the
the part
biggest red
people overlook.
flag that people have?
Because they'll go single thread. When we did we do a companion show for the NFL draft for 3 days, and we did a single drop and a backup drop, and just to make sure
Yeah.
when there was a problem, because there was going to be a problem, you have that second path out. You're never going to be able to find what it is that's going to break. Everything's probably going to break. You're redundant. It starts to sound a lot like broadcast, where there's redundancy in everything. That's why the control rooms look exactly alike, so that you can run from one to the other when something breaks. And we're going down this road as content creators and as on the technical side, very quickly towards broadcast setups. Control rooms, trucks, redundancy, HD, and it's all the same pieces. There's just a lot more plugs and there's a lot fewer people. There's the engineering department.
So how do you
That would
how
be
do you,
the
how do you,
engineering
how do you
department.
do that with
Well,
a lot fewer people? Or,
I mean, I would say this, because the kind of projects I work on don't often have budget for complete redundancy. So, like when I was doing My Name Channel Live, it was for a YouTube premium channel, and we had enough budget to get a TriCaster in our control room, and that needed to be our primary encoder. We only had a single internet drop. We couldn't afford to do redundancy. So, but you have to ask yourself, if this fails, what do we do? And in a broadcast situation, often it's well, you go to your backup encoder. But since we don't have a backup encoder, what we had to do was we had a social media person who was there, who was active in the comments, and who could put things up on the screen being explaining what was going on. So thankfully we had a fiber optic connection, so we really didn't have many problems. But when we did, occasionally, she was able to go on there and explain to the audience what was happening, so that they still felt like they were connected to something and someone was working on it behind the scenes. And it's not obviously ideal. Obviously, the ideal is you never go down. But if you do, you should have a contingency plan in place.
Do you guys use social media as a feedback loop to discover it's not working or something? It's not like TV where you can have a
canary in a
confidence
coal mine.
monitor.
That's how you know when
That's
your
how you
audio's
know.
out of sync. They'll
Yep.
tell you right
Audio
away.
out of sync is the first thing they yell at you for is
Yeah.
audio out of sync.
Yep.
And sometimes they're not right about that.
Right.
You tell them to refresh the computer.
Yes.
Yeah.
Actually, our favorite comment is there's an echo, and the answer is usually, well, you have 2 windows open. So.
Two players.
That's
Right.
where the echo
That
comes
happens
from.
a lot.
I think it would be fair to say that if 10 people are telling you there's no audio,
Yeah,
you
then
have
you
a
might
problem.
do
But if
I mean,
one person is
I'm
telling
guilty of having
you,
2
you
players
have,
open at the same time
No.
when I'm working the show.
Yeah, we would have people sometimes go to coffee shops to see what our show looked like on YouTube, and they would be texting with my social media person, just be audio sync, and then they'll text back all good, stuff like that.
we veered into social media, and I not just as a feedback to the production, but that is one way of promoting and building the audience and stuff. And maybe it's just worth a moment to discuss that. What features do you do, or how do you guys use social media to build your audience or grow while the show is on, and whether it's Twitter or Facebook or many of the
I can
others?
speak to that. When I was working on My Name Channel Live, obviously YouTube is very big on comments. So we would bring these, famous comedians, but more so the famous YouTubers. And what was really exciting to the audience was for the first time they could leave a comment, and within a minute or two, we would have it up on screen and they would read it live and then respond to them live on camera, which was really exciting for people because they really felt like they were interacting. And the way we did that, being a fairly low-budget show, was we had a social media operator, her name is Molly Templeton, who was just in our control room on an iMac, just going through Twitter, Facebook, Tumblr, and YouTube comments. And when she found something good, she'd screen cap it, put it full screen, and then she would just yell, Facebook. And then I would say, Facebook comment. And then, my floor manager would hold up his thing, Facebook, and then be like, oh, we've got a comment from Facebook. And then we'd take it full, and then I could bring it in as a lower third. And it was really cool, and I think that's one of the things that made our show really popular was that direct one-on-one interaction with our fans.
I think from the audience perspective, one thing that really struck me when I first started working at Ustream was I noticed we had all these people doing these live chats. And so we had really big celebrities, and what they were doing in this situation was they were actually just broadcasting into a computer on a webcam, and they were reading the comments on the computer. And what I realized was, this is really exciting for me as a fan, because if this is like my biggest idol ever that I'm watching on the screen, and I see that they're reading some comment box, and I'm typing in that same comment box, it's like I'm in this IM conversation with them. And a lot of times people feel this need like, oh, we have to filter all the comments, we don't want to let the host read them directly, or we don't want to let the talent read them directly. And a lot of times there's like this, well, we're going to have like the PR person or whatever filter them and only give them the ones that we like. And I remember we did one live chat with some R&B artist, I don't remember who it was, and she was like, after like her manager was like filtering all these comments and giving her these like sort of fake ones that they had made up, she was like, just let me see that thing, and grabbed the iPad and just started reading people's things directly. And after that, it just became so much more exciting because it was like, hey, oh, I see so-and-so, shout out to that person. Or we had one thing Nicki Minaj was doing. People were putting their real phone numbers in the chat, and she would just pick one out and call them and go, hey, it's Nicki Minaj, and people would freak out. It's like, it's like the radio thing when, like people call in, they start just losing their minds and screaming for like 10 seconds straight. But I think, one thing that's really exciting with doing live streaming internet media is that it doesn't have to be quite as overproduced and carefully controlled as traditional TV. It's exciting to have that kind of like feedback, that engagement,
sure.
Like you're saying. People just love it when like they can see their comment read on the screen. They love it that like they can somehow influence the action. So I would really recommend you take advantage of that if you're doing a live event, and don't think about it like, oh, we have to control every aspect so carefully. You need to control every aspect of the technical production really carefully so that it doesn't go off air and people can hear and all the technical production is flawless. But when it comes to creatively, think a little bit outside the box and how you can make it a little less scripted and a little bit more fun, more interactive, more what people want from the internet, not this like sort of like, oh, it's over there and it's kind of like this production that is out of reach to normal people.
And the way we talk to our producers is, let them see the sausage being made. Because what you're describing at the end of the day and what we all sort of working on the producer side is, this is a form of talk radio. And you need to make sure you're connecting there and it's driving your content and it's driving your decisions. Raw should be super easy. It's really hard. It's hard to get authenticity and rawness into a broadcast because of the way that you need your talent to react and what you need your producers to let go, which producers are terrible at. But it's the key to really creating something that people will connect with.
So at Yahoo, it's generally different for every event. But like for the Hunger Games, sometimes we'll use an embed module on the page. But for Hunger Games last night, we had Twitter comments burned into the bottom of the screen in the lower thirds. And if anybody's familiar from the MTV days with Amy Paffrath, she was one of the MCs of the event, and we had a big touch monitor panel screen, and she would read out Twitter comments, the Twitter username, and read out the comment and do an interview with the celebrity as they came by and talk about the comment. A lot of times they go like that. We'll use a touch panel on the actual location.
I do have a tip for dealing with this because generally, if you're dealing with people who have a big online audience, it can very easily be overwhelming. So it's careful. You have to be careful sometimes with because we actually tried doing what you suggested earlier, which when we first integrated comments, we did that too, where we just had them reading it off a screen. But what ended up happening were there were so many comments pouring in at that point that it was hard for them to keep up, and it felt very distracting, which is why we got Molly to start pulling individual comments. But even then got a little overwhelming, because one time we had We did a show that was hosted by Daily Grace, who's a huge YouTuber. She's like over 2 million subscribers. And then her guest was Bella Thorne, who's on, I guess on the Disney Channel or something. I forget the name of it. Shake It Up, I think is the name of the show. So obviously the two of them, it was just like this perfect storm of comments. And they were just pouring in so quickly that she wasn't even able to screen cap the good ones. And so at that point, it was just like, they were all trying to have the conversation at the same time, and it was like people were shouting. And there was nothing we could do except go to other platforms to pull, like Twitter and whatnot, because sometimes it can just be absolutely overwhelming.
We see the same thing. Like if they can be filtered, filter them.
Yeah.
Just like you said, they'll just come in scrolling down so fast you can't even read them.
Yeah.
When they come in on a big show.
But certainly by being live, you have the ability to do all these features, and that really makes it part of the show, that element. Just one other dimension I'd want to go over is, some people think of doing the live streaming and they think of just the time that you're streaming. But I think that's the wrong approach, because you really have to think about the before and building it and the planning, and then there's the during it, what happens, and the social part, and then there's also the after part of it, which sometimes the after part could be, you could have more traffic after it than during it.
Always.
So I want to make people aware that don't think of it just as what happens when the camera's on and you're live streaming, and maybe you guys could share how the before and the after, how that's so more important sometimes. Does anyone want to go first? You or Jack or?
Yeah, I mean, it was just, I think mainly because a lot of the stuff I do is for YouTube, and YouTube is such an on-demand platform. After we would finish a live stream, it would, re-encode itself, I guess, as an on-demand video. And those numbers would always dwarf our live numbers. I think mainly because if you wanted to catch our show, you had to be watching during the 30 or 60 minutes it was on.
Yep.
If you want to watch it on demand, you can watch it whenever you want, and you can watch it as often as you want.
Can I try a quick little 30-second preview, and we'll show what?
Oh yeah, you want to see?
Let's see if I can get this.
This is just like the first minute of my reel, which has some funny stuff from the show that I did.
Just watch 30 seconds. This is some of the.
Was what I've always wanted to do.
I really, really do like the sound of football in the background. Is this a voodoo doll? Are you trying to kill Christian? Or
Yes.
Okay. Well, anyway, and that doesn't look like streaming. I mean, that looks like real TV. I want
Yeah, I mean, we were trying. I mean, I have a broadcast background, so what we were trying to do was like bring TV production value to it, but still be a sort of silly, messy internet show that we would set up a slip and slide and cover it with whipped cream and have our guests go down. I mean, we're still trying to sort of be YouTube, but shoot it professionally so that it wasn't. Because a lot of times, I think one of the mistakes I think people make is, especially old media people, when they come to a platform like YouTube, is they go, "Oh, it's YouTube. It's supposed to be sloppy and terrible and whatever. It doesn't matter. Sometimes the audio doesn't work. Who cares? That's YouTube." And it's just, I find that's not the case, because your audience hates that when they see that stuff. And you should still take a very professional approach. But I do agree that it does need to be a bit more raw and honest, and they do like seeing behind the curtain. I think that's the stuff that gets them really excited. So you don't have to feel like you need to, make sure it's super clean, and you don't see, they love to see the dirty moments, but at the same time, the production should never be sloppy, in my opinion.
I saw Bill, both of you were nodding as he was saying that. Do you want to add to that?
That's the key to it, and that's hard. I mean, that's really hard to do. That requires a lot of thought, and you have to have failed a lot at live television to know how not to then bail in doing it on a live stream.
Yeah.
You've got to have a lot of TV broadcasts crash hard on air for you to be like, oh, I don't want to step over there. But that rawness that's authenticity, that's original, and that's what people will come back for. They can't ever tell you why they're coming back from that, but that builds the kind of loyalty on a regularly scheduled product. So when you're interacting with the comments and the comments are driving your content, and then you're making sure that you're not too stiff, that you do have these sort of unplanned moments of hilarity or disruption, that's what people are coming to you for. They want that. They want the opposite of what they're going to get somewhere else.
On your comment of what do you do before and after, we always recommend people go live as early as you can possibly afford to go live. It's tough if you're using satellite trucks, but I guarantee at least a chunk of your audience will show up 3 hours early because they don't know how time zones work. That's what we found in our experience. This is true.
And
there'll
watch
be
it
a
for
lot of
3
people
hours.
that will show up an hour early. A big mistake we see people make, and we've worked with some of the biggest TV networks, all the 3-letter networks, and they do something like this. They go, well, you know what, the event's going to start at 7, so at 6:58, we're going to have our web guy embed the player.
Yeah. Right.
And, it's not going to show up till 6:58 because, it doesn't start till 7, and, we don't want to, have it look sloppy, so, so then what happens is people go to the page, they're like, well, I don't see a player here, I don't know what's happening, or maybe they just see a black player or something. Yeah. And so you really need to make sure that you have a page where it's very clear in the messaging. People are they will not get it. The one thing that we take for granted with TV is that if I say something's on Comedy Central at 11 p.m., you know how to get there, right? And you know when you're on it. And there's no question, even if the content that you're watching is not the show that you tuned in for, you can check the guide, you know exactly that I'm on Comedy Central, it's starting at 11, whatever I want to watch. But it's not that way with the internet because you can just embed a player anywhere. People won't know if they're in the right place. They won't know if they're at the right time. So you need to build a nice page which says, hey, yes, this is the player. That little box you see to the left, that's where it's going to be. Have some social media or have some kind of chat module so people can, let people know what's going on. Countdown clock.
What do you put in the player itself? Again, the thing hasn't
Put the
started.
countdown clock in the player.
Countdown clock, or if you have a show and you can have someone host a pre-show, that's great too.
Or just flip the studio camera on. Just
put
go put a GoPro in
camera
a
up in the
corner so
yeah.
it looks cool and just let it run.
And just another quick tip. Sorry, I'll just real quick. If you
can
do
see the
a
passion for this,
1 hour countdown clock, which we would do sometimes for our live streams on YouTube, when it flips into an on-demand video, people have immediately panic and they go, "Oh no, the on-demand video now has an hour clock before the video." YouTube lets you trim that. So make sure you do that. Go ahead.
So we, on our fantasy football live show that we stream on Sundays, we do use a countdown clock. If our live event's generated from a Yahoo studio, they use a countdown clock a lot of times. But so I'm glad I'm not the only one who hates that. Put on the page at the last minute strategy. Never. That's driven me nuts for 10 years. So a couple of years ago, we adopted the strategy of we just grab a slate. We create a slate either I keep going back to Hunger Games last night. Even for Thor or the Catching Fire show, we'll create a slate of it and we'll write in there, this event begins at, or stay tuned, the broadcast resumes, or we'll start shortly. And we always start our encoders 2 hours ahead of time.
2 hours.
2 hours. Yep. So the point he got to a while ago, you got a lot of time to troubleshoot.
Yep.
Even if it's not actually live, you're live with a slate, you can still troubleshoot and make sure that your path works on every single device at every single bit rate. Mm-hmm.
And you know what the other thing will happen is everyone cares about numbers at the end of the day. Everyone's producing a live event. You have to show those numbers to your boss and go, hey, our event was a success. And if you turn on your stream 2 hours early, all those viewers still count to that number. And I'll tell you, my experience is I've dealt with very smart people. People only care about that top line number. Yeah. No one really cares about well, did they actually watch the event? Did they actually watch this long? If you can say, look, we had 2 million people view, they're like, 2 million, that sounds awesome. So because the only thing people know is the number that's under the YouTube player. Yeah. That's their only frame of reference for
or under the Ustream player. It just counts the total plays.
But the same thing, under a YouTube video is just the number of people that loaded that video and watched for some period of time, and that's sort of the measuring stick in online video at this point in time. And so the only number that really matters for most people in this world at this point is just that top line, how many people tuned in. I'm sure we'll get to a point eventually where people start paying attention to, hey, we should actually worry about whether someone watched my video for 10 minutes or whether or not they engage with it in some way. Yeah. But turning on your event early, running it longer will help you grow bigger numbers too. That's important.
We also replay most of our big live events. We replay them immediately after, so it's still live, but it's mock live. Mm-hmm. So we capture it on an Aja Key Pro device. If you
And they just bring that back into
have
the
that
How many?
source.
Just
Yep.
one?
Play it
Like
back
once
right
you
away.
loop it back, or more than
Yeah,
once?
we've done that
We'll
before.
play it back one time, and sort of the strategy there is A, to generate more streams, but B, is to get the VOD content up on the page before that replay is over with, so there's nothing dead on the page.
Do you put something up that says it's a replay, or do you put it up
Usually,
as live?
so we do it two ways. At the truck, if they have a slate in the production truck, they'll have a slate that says, stay tuned for the rebroadcast or the replay, live replay. If they don't, we will make a slate.
But do you put a bug in it? Is that what
Yeah,
you're
like
saying? Do you put like a
previously
bug in it
recorded.
saying previously recorded or something like that?
We don't do that.
Yeah, so when we do the NFL draft, we cut in real time. We cut the stream in real time, so we're split it off out of the control room, and so we have a dedicated edit group, and we have the stream group.
Cool.
And the edit group is cutting in real time and then publishing out to the channels that's most interested in that content. So yeah, there's a lot. There's a wow. I'm glad somebody said wow, because that is.
You
it's
can
a
tell
little crazy.
these are things streamers focus on and try to figure out the
Yeah.
before and
We're
the
trying
after.
to
But I
solve
want to
that
get to
turnaround.
questions. But
I just wanted to say
Kevin-
another quick tip. One of the things that we started doing too when we were doing the my show on YouTube was we would get, since we had so many big YouTube stars, both as hosts and as guests, what we would do is the 10 minutes before the show, we would have them sign into their YouTube accounts and start commenting with the commenters to get them to that countdown clock. Yep. And so they didn't feel like, oh, I'm just staring at a number ticking down. It gave them something to do, and that was amazing. That got incredible engagement. We would see the numbers go up, 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 because what tends to happen is we had a show at 4 o'clock, and then people would kind of start watching at like 4:10 or whatever. But if they know that like Daily Grace and Tyler Oakley and Hannah Hart are in the chat room, which we called it, 10 minutes before, they all try to get there before so they can directly interact with them in the comments. And then when the show starts right at 4, everyone's watching.
You're not going to go from 0 to 1 million like that, like a
Yeah.
TV channel would. But if you start early, you're starting to build it slowly.
Yeah.
But I wanted to get to some questions. So there is a microphone. If you can either pass it or come down, because otherwise it won't get picked up for the recording. So we got 1 and 2. Go ahead.
Hello?
Yep, it's on.
Yeah, all right. So this question's probably more for Alden, but you guys can definitely weigh in on Ustream. So if we have our primary upload and we've got a second drop for a secondary backup, how do we switch to the
good question.
backup if the primary isn't working? What strategies, what technologies?
So we don't have it as like a open feature for everyone at this point, a redundant ingest, but we do it for big events. So talk to me and I'll set it up
Awesome.
for you.
So there is a way to make a seamless switch.
We do
from the
a backup redundant ingest for our enterprise level events. So.
Thank you. I guess for all of you, in terms of closed captioning, what are some best practices or tips that you can provide in your live streaming and doing closed captioning?
That is a
great
good
question.
question that I knew was going to get asked, and right now the answer is we don't.
We don't.
Yeah,
We don't.
I've never done it either.
We
I think
have
you just
a,
kinda
Not live,
follow- You
anyway.
follow
Yeah.
the rule, which is since it's not for television, you don't have to. So
Yeah.
So we have a lot of people who use our platform who also do it for television. So one of the big differences between sort of your cheap encoders and those enterprise level encoders is pretty much all the enterprise level encoders will allow accepting the captions basically embedded with the SDI, and those can be sent to us. So for all of our broadcasters who are doing regular television and are also on the web, it is a government requirement. They have to do closed captions, so we're supporting that for them. And we have captions for any live stream, also working through an iPad, everything like that. So I think there's some other solutions which are sort of like, we could call them, in the cloud or like client-side captioning things where you do some kind of like JavaScript overlay on the player and someone types in the captions. But the thing is that the part of captioning that's really expensive, of course, is having someone sit there and actually type them. And so for anyone who's in the position where they're making them for TV, they're already doing that piece. And so the best thing for them to do is to take the captions that are already being created for regular TV, embed those into the signal that's going to the web, and figure out a workflow so you can pass them through.
Do you got a percentage of how many people are actually doing that of all your?
I mean, pretty much all of our, of course, I want to make sure no one gets in trouble. So all of our people who are broadcasting TV are also doing captions. right now.
But
CBS,
and the folks who are not doing TV probably
they don't have to. There's no requirement.
So
So for example, CBS, PBS, and NASA all use us. They all do regular TV broadcasts. All of them are doing captions on our platform right now. So.
Okay. Any other questions?
Yes,
Go ahead.
you mentioned Wirecast. Just would like to see what your feelings are on software encoding versus hardware encoding.
And cloud.
And, yeah.
So that I was actually going to hope we could get to that because I think
ahead.
the answer is no one knows. What do you prefer?
For me, it's hardware encoding.
Because,
It's just more reliable.
Yeah.
Because you have someone to maintain
Software crashes.
but you have somebody that's
Yeah, we
he's
do.
your guy,
Yeah.
and that's
So
that's
if
a resource
budget,
issue.
if money is not an
Yeah.
issue,
Right.
you would go with the hardware
Right.
encoding.
I would too, but generally I tend to use software encoders, just like what's in the TriCaster because of budget. And yeah,
Yeah.
software crashes.
Yep.
Thankfully, doesn't happen often, at least in my experience.
Yeah, much less often than
But
used to.
when it happens, it's terrible.
We get this question a lot, and I've done a lot of talks where I've said to people, what do you think the big difference is between a free encoder and a $40,000 encoder? And a lot of people say quality, and it's not true at all. The biggest difference is basically just the reliability. Like software encoding can look awesome.
Yep.
It can be super reliable. The one thing I tend to say to people is like, if you're the type of guy that you love the idea that you built your own computer, you know all the components in it, you know how to fix it when it goes wrong, then you could build like a kick-butt FMLE command line server that could be almost as good as your enterprise level hardware encoder. But most people are just not that. That's not what they want to spend time on. So the big difference with the hardware encoders is they're just really built to be super programmable, super flexible, super reliable. They're built for 24/7 operation. Software encoders are just, they can be great if you know what you're doing, you install them on the right machines, but they usually require a little more babysitting. They're not quite as good for 24/7 operation, and you definitely run into crashes and things like that.
And when my version of Chris has recently come to me and has told me about all the encoders he wants to buy, I listen carefully and I go, and then who's going to fix them when they break? And the conversation seems to stop there.
That's what service warranty is for.
Okay, good question. Go ahead.
Thanks for the presentation. My name is Andreas Damiano. I'm with the UN Web TV at the United Nations. We do a lot of live streaming every day. Some of them in 6 languages. But we archive only maybe 1 or 2 languages because of the rising cost of the storage. Do you have any, do you know any player that can play a single video stream with multiple audio tracks, different languages? So like this we can save storage.
In multiple languages?
Like an SAT.
UNTV is going to get into streaming on the web in multiple languages?
We stream multiple events every day now.
There are
We stream it-
definitely,
we
there are
stream it
definitely
live
players that can do it, yeah.
seen it.
I don't know if we've
Live?
done it specifically for anyone or not, but I've seen it. I have a friend who produced an event it wasn't for United Nations, but it was for a big conference in Europe, and it was a similar type of event, and they had to have like 6 stages in 6 languages. It can be done, so.
We did
can
something
talk
off of your
afterwards.
platform, I think.
Oh,
We
yeah,
did-
yeah. We
a
did do one.
TechCrunch event in
Yeah,
20 languages.
so you can absolutely do it. We can talk after this.
Thank you.
How are you currently doing it? Are you going out to multiple video players?
Well, for the live events, we do single live streams for each language. But for
But
archiving,
that's not desirable?
But for archiving, we have only maybe 1 language or 2 languages, because you don't want to archive the same video 6 times.
Yeah.
Right. I think we have time for one more. So go ahead.
I'm wondering if you have an event where you have like a live chat and your talent is going to interact with that live chat, do you make any kind of affordance for HLS and the fact that the latency there is like 30 seconds, so you don't have your talent ask a question, say, hey, what do you guys think? And then there's an awkward silence because they're not going to see them say that for 20 seconds?
So you can solve it with graphics. Just leave the question up the whole time. That way you can get past that. And that way the direct ask is going out in a passive form as opposed to active for the anchor or the talent or however they are, and they're just receiving as opposed to sending out. That's how we get around it, and that comes back to planning too. Like, are you putting out those questions ahead of time? Are you hashtagging those? Are you pre-soliciting? So when you get into the pre-solicit, you can kind of get past that because it builds up.
Yeah,
get
it's
to.
not a live studio audience. It's definitely going to be, I mean, depending on where you are too. When we were doing My Name Channel Live, it was live in New York City, and for whatever reason, like it was on YouTube only a couple seconds later. So I think it was like a 5-second delay, believe it or not. But then when I was doing Watch What Happens Live out in Anaheim, it was, I don't know, 90 seconds. So the way we dealt with that was they would pose the question as sort of a call to action, like, what do you guys think about this? We'll be checking Twitter and coming in, and then we would come back to it a few minutes later. If we had to wait for that response, it would just be, fill time. Awkward.
Do you have any on the delay, the latency?
Yeah, I think, well, as Bill and Jack said, I think that pretty much, probably part of what Jack was alluding to is RTMP streaming. One thing that was very nice about it was it had lower delay, and pretty much everyone's moving away from RTMP streaming. So pretty much any streaming platform now, you're gonna have to expect a 30 to 60-second delay, unless you're paying insane money to make it lower than that. So I think the best way to approach it is, in the production like Bill and Jack alluded to, which is just, you call out for questions earlier. Maybe you have a canned question or two that can bridge that gap. But you just have to assume that that's going to be the case, and then just make sure you afford for that time in the way you program the talent.
Well, I think our time is up, but I thank all the panelists. A lot of good information, and I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you.